In other injury news, James Conner is confident he's going to play on Sunday. Devin Singletary is considered day-to-day with a hamstring. Damian Williams' knee is not considered serious.
Deshaun Jackson sitting out the Lions game.
Yeah, Deshaun and Alshon look likely to sit out versus the Lions. So
why are y'all sitting out to face us? I got to ask. Why are you sitting out the Lions game to try and face the Packers?
Well, I think it's more being a short week. You want to be ready for the Packers in case you do lose. And also, if I'm not mistaken, it's at Green Bay.
Yep. Thursday Night Football. Prime time.
It just takes into account the fact that the Lions game is a home game, and we might have a little better odds there. And it's not easy to win on the road in Lambeau on a short week, so he probably wants to be ready for that. And I don't blame him.
Don't overlook those kiddies.
Definitely need him out there. We're going to miss the deep threat and being able to score at any moment because that's what he brings.
Well, do you think Archaea Whiteside comes out and shows out a little bit?
Hey, but he's not the same player. He's more along the Alshon, body you up, catch the 50-50 balls, those type of plays. I mean, D-Jax is really the only deep threat we have, man. I mean, Aguilar's gotten loose in the past, and I know he's caught a few deep balls, but really D-Jax he's the key piece to this offense right now. With all the underneath guys we have, we need him to stretch the field. And you saw that when the comeback in the Redskins game, and it was very evident in the Falcons game when they kept having to dink and dunk and hit Ertz and find Aguilar. And, Mac Hollins was trying to make plays, and Arcega Whiteside, it's just, especially with Goddard being out too, obviously. That apparently, according to Doug,
that's a big.
There were a lot of two tight end formations that were planned for this game that they weren't able to execute because Goddard was out. So,
what is bothering? What's ailing you?
Honestly, man, I'd have to look it up. I could do it real quick, but I'm not sure. I know he went out early. I know it's an ab strain for D-Jax, and I know it's a calf for Alshon. So, I mean, luckily Ertz took a bad shot, and he was out and was able to come back in. And Wentz himself took a bad shot and was able to come back in. So it was just a horrible night for the Eagles. I mean, we lost Timmy Jernigan.
Is Wentz going to make it through the season?
6 weeks. Wentz, you asked if Wentz is going to make it through the season?
Yeah, because he seems to be putting himself in harm's way after a fracture in his back last season.
I'll tell you this, when he took that read option for the 2-point conversion, and it looked exactly the same as when he dove into the end zone against the Rams and tore his ACL. So I'm sure Eagles fans everywhere, just like myself, were holding their breath as he did that. And it was a very interesting call that they decided to say he was giving himself up when just 2 years ago, the exact same play, he goes in for a touchdown, and it's a touchdown, and he was giving himself up on the 1-yard line. And that ended up being a pivotal 2-point conversion because then later on, when we were down in the red zone, a field goal could have won it. Instead, ended up having to throw that pass to Ertz that ends up a yard short. Heartbreaker in Atlanta. We could have been 2-0, and now we're staring at 1-1, thinking about what could have been. And Ertz is down on himself, and the team's banged up. And hopefully there's just a big recovery week at home against Detroit, and looked pretty good this past week. And carry on with juking and jiving and doing his thing. So I think it's going to be a win for the Eagles, regardless of Deshaun and Alshon not being out there.
I expect a couple turnovers from Stafford.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you really saw Jim Schwartz turn it on throughout that entire game pretty much. Once the receivers were out, there was a lot more blitzing, a lot more making Matt Ryan make quick decisions and get the ball out quick, which unfortunately bit us in the ass at the end of the game with that Julio touchdown, but otherwise it was working pretty well.
Well, Julio's just a freak of nature. No one that big is supposed to be that agile and turn the corner and get to that speed. Like he's one of those generational talents. So I mean, it's not like it's just some guy. Julio is Julio.
No, you're right. But the Eagles know that. Like we played Julio before. That's the thing. And on a 4th down call to leave him in what was clearly going to be a one-on-one situation is just absurd to me. I understand they were trying to do the same thing they'd been doing and blitz Matt Ryan and make him throw an inaccurate pass, but it was just too easy to get the ball out there on a bubble screen, and he takes it to the house, man. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't try that same type of look, but then drop Brad him out into a flat zone, and he picks that ball off easily. But I don't know. Obviously, hindsight's 20/20, and you can be a couch quarterback, that type of thing. But it was an interesting call.
I mean,
anyways,
Schwartz coached Stafford for how many years? He knows Stafford just as good as anyone, even better. He knows what makes him tick. He knows what makes him kind of go through his reads and how he works through things. So, I mean, Schwartz, to me, kind of has the upper hand.
That's a very good point, and I think we saw that come into play just this past week in the Broncos-Bears game. I mean, Fangio made Mitch Trubisky look like Mr.
Everything the Bears were going to do.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, I know you guys, I'm not trying to bring this up and get into a rabbit hole on the Packers, but that's why it really blew me away the Packers didn't go with Fangio, because you have a division rival who was clearly successful in the Bears, and Fangio knows everything about him. And it's just weird. It's strange, but I mean, it's obviously working out now. I mean, that was a huge game to beat the Vikings like that. I know they were slipping back in the game late.
They were not going to go with the defensive head coach when they needed, when the whole veteran committee that they had of players went and asked for this specific type of offense after they played the Rams. That's what's came out.
They tried to bring in Fangio when Patton came in as the defensive coordinator.
Yeah, they tried to bring in Fangio as their defensive coordinator.
He said no.
He took the Bears job, and he said no, and he went back, and he went to the Bears. So he was not interested in Green Bay because he had. I think he has a thing because of what went on between Green Bay and when he was the D coordinator in the 49ers. There's something with him because he's so old school. It was like he wasn't going to go be part of that organization when he was used to tearing it apart in the playoffs.
He respects the rivalry. That's what he does.
I don't know. He's dumb. Then he's dumb.
I'm sorry. I love Vic Fangio, but at the same time, Mike Pettin has been in many places and had top 10 defenses. It's not like Mike Pettin ain't
Buffalo, New York.
I'm sorry, but Mike Pettin, in my opinion, was a little bit step above from what Fangio is. And do you know why? Because as a head coach, he is the last and only head coach since this whole thing has happened to have a winning record in freaking Cleveland. Cleveland's last winning record was when Pettin was their head coach. He went 9-7, and they fired him, and they haven't been above 500 since.
No, Pettin had a really good year the year before with Hoyer, and then the next year he got shoved into the Johnny Manziel show, and he didn't really have a choice. Jimmy Haslam, the Browns owner, basically said, "Hey, we're starting Johnny Football."
I don't count that year because they took the team away from him.
But that's what I'm saying. That's how it ended. It was just a bad taste in the mouth for Pettin, so that's why he went back to being a D coordinator. He didn't want to put up with that drama with the owners and the GM anymore.
No, I'm just saying that's what gives me the edge for Pettin being a little better overall coach than Fangio, because I've seen him.
I get what you're saying. I was just adding the extra perspective.
He's choosing not to be a head coach, but I think he proved with one of the most crappy franchises in the world, he's the last head coach to have them above 500. That's why I consider him a better overall coach than Fangio.
Brian Hoyer.
Fangio I respect the hell out of him. I take nothing away from him. But I think given the two choices, they ended up having a guy that I think is a little better coach, and I don't know if Fangio can necessarily take crap talent the way that Pettin has shown that he can do and turn it into frickin' filet mignon. You know, like, Fangio's always been on teams as great as he's been. He's always had stacked teams as far as talent goes. I mean, even before they got Khalil Mack, that was a hell of a stacked defense. They were damn good. Khalil Mack just made it ridiculous. You know what I mean, guys? Like, I don't know if Fangio necessarily can do it. And even now, that defense is a really good defense. A lot of stacked players. I've never seen him go and do something the way Mike Pettin has done in some of the places he's been. And, i.e., last year with Green Bay, they finished 18th overall. And they had I think 2 of their 11 opening day starters left on the
Tyler
team.
Sacro.
I guess that's why I look at that. Rabbit hole, bye.
No, you're right. I have no problem with Petman, honestly. I mean, if they had made him the head coach, I wouldn't have had an issue with it at all. Like, my whole thing with Green Bay is I just thought you have a guy with Aaron Rodgers who basically, like, as a GM, here's what I would have done. Hired a defensive-minded head coach because that was the side of the ball that needed the most improvement. And then I simply asked my Pro Bowl, Super Bowl winning quarterback, who would you like to be the offensive coordinator? And if that's what they did, and I just don't even know it, then I'm an idiot. But that's what I would have done.
Well, I mean, it kind of seems like it because everyone kept saying that McDaniels was the guy. McDaniels was the guy. Jay has brought this up in the past, and where the fact everyone kept saying McDaniels was the guy, and then boom, out of left field, Matt LaFleur. I mean, that's the thing. Rodgers actually got to sit in on the phone interview with all the candidates and ask questions. So, I mean, he got to kind of choose the coach he wanted. And one of the things LaFleur said in the interview, Dillon, was, if I'm coming there, I want Mike Pettin as my defensive coordinator.
Rodgers loves Pettin, FYI.
I know he does. I was saying they kind of did agree to it because Rodgers. I mean, you got to think he was giving feedback to Murphy after that interview.
Look, this is
it's clear that they have a relationship.
What's that, Dillon?
No, I was just going to say, especially after that Week 1 win and Rodgers gives them that shove in the chest, it's clear that they have a little buddy-buddy thing going on.
Oh, because
good though. It means there's unity.
Because, well, here's what it is too. Rodgers, you got to remember, he's at a point in his career now where his football acumen, he is basically a coach on the field. So I have no doubt in my mind if he has a defensive question or something that it's not really so much a question, but if he has a thought or something he wants to bounce off, I have no doubt in my mind he goes and sits in the office with Mike Pettin and they have conversations about, like, that's just the level of his football knowledge. And I think that's probably, and I think that's where that relationship goes. I mean, again, Pettin is, you never heard Rodgers, I don't think, the whole time Capers was there. I never heard or saw Rodgers ever really have any sort of interaction or comment about Capers at all, honestly. Like, since Mike's gotten there, there's been a lot of him pumping Mike up and talking about how great the defense has improved and that they got to do their part because he's doing everything he can. Like, he's talked a lot about this defense since Mike Pettin's been there. That gives me this idea that these two have a very close relationship in that building when it comes to things Rodgers probably wants to know defensively, how a defensive coordinator or if he wants to, well, how would you react to this? He's probably going to Pettin and they're having these conversations is my best guess.
So something I got to address real quick, Dylan, before we get more back in your fantasy files. People are asking me at work, they're asking me on Twitter, man, how come that spat looked horrible between LaFleur and Rodgers? Guys, he was not yelling at LaFleur. Rodgers was giving his frustrations to LaFleur about his receiver not running the right route. You can even see him, look at the clip, he's pointing to the field and pointing he should have ran it in instead of an out. And that's the thing. He was frustrated. He was mad because the receiver should know this stuff. So he walked to the bench. And they asked Rodgers, well, what was different about this? LaFleur walked over to Rodgers, sat on the bench with him, and said, forget about it. Let's move on to the next thing. Let's try and fix this and move on and get some more points on the board.
Do you know what the key is
Rodgers
right
said
there, guys?
McCarthy's never done that, ever. So that's the thing. LaFleur is making the initiative to make this work.
Well, here's the other cool thing about that. Rodgers, how many times have we heard that Rodgers, he's got to quit yelling at his young receivers? So what does he do? He basically did what everybody wanted him to do. He didn't yell at the receiver or get on the receiver. He walked to the sidelines and he blew up at his head coach. Not on his head coach, blew up at his head coach. Then he walked over. The head coach, just like Dave just said, walks over there. They fix the situation. And so basically, you can't have your cake and eat it too, everybody out there wanting to make this into some BS that it ain't. You didn't like him
Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk.
Didn't like him yelling at his young wide receivers and their demeanor, so he does what you want him to do. Look, every quarterback blows up, and I'm so sick of this. But like you guys all said, don't yell at the young receivers. Well, then who's the next person you can vent to? It's your head